Hello everybody, my name is Patricia Ibon. I am the community liaison for Richfield Police Department in a program called Joint Community Police Partnership. It's a program for Hennepin County. And as October commemorates the Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, some agencies have joined forces to fight against domestic abuse, including the Richfield Police Department, Cornerstone, MIRA, Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and Joint Community Police Partnership. We are hosting this presentation to help prevent, help reporting, and help heal with domestic abuse. We would like to extend this invitation for all the community to enjoy our forces to raise awareness regarding to this issue. Share resources, information, and this recorded. This presentation will be perfect to share with family members, neighbors, clients, and your network.
My name is Officer Rosas, Richfield Police Department. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and with that we have just a few statistical things. 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner, and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. On average, 3 women are killed by a current or former intimate partner each day in the United States. In fact, domestic violence is the #1 cause of injury of women 15 to 44. In Richfield, Minnesota, many cases of domestic violence and abuse go unreported because of fear of law enforcement agencies' lack of support and financial dependency. With the current social and economic situation, the community needs to know how to get access to the available resources, and we need to speak about this issue and show that is more common than you think. You will be safe and secure reporting it.
All right, good evening. My name is Christina Warren.
And I'm James Hanneman.
And we're senior attorneys with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. We work in our sexual assault initiative, and we work to make sure that there is accountability for criminal sexual conduct offenses that occur within Hennepin County, and we work closely with our community partners in order to try to reduce the prevalence of criminal sexual conduct in our community. So we are here today to talk about the topic of consent. And to kick us off,
team versus team.
That's as good as it gets.
Oh man, I've never had more fun my whole life.
Daddy's had a bear. I'm gonna go to another one there.
Get your card?
No, Lamorne, stop doing magic. You're not good at it.
Guys! Oh, dude! There's a bear in your other room here.
Oh, that's just the big, angry, hungry bear. Just pretend it's not there.
Oh, really? Yeah. It'll just go away? What are you talking about?
No, I don't think it's going anywhere, but I don't know what to do about it, so I just ignore it.
So it's not dangerous, right?
Define dangerous. It's a bear. But, you know, it's not gonna eat all of us. It only eats like 1 in 5s. I said only 1 in 5, so we're fine.
That's a lot, man. That means one of us is gonna be eaten.
Statistically. That doesn't mean 1 of us. It means 1 in 5 people get eaten.
You're doing something about this, man.
Hey, what do you want me to do about it? You guys know the old saying, bears will be bears.
That's not a saying.
Lamorne, a bear will be a bear, so...
You can't just blame the bear, not when it's attacking 20% of the people who come here.
20%? I said 1 in 5.
Yes, that's 20%.
No, it isn't. It's 1 in 5, you math nerd. Let's pile on this guy.
Dude, you gotta get rid of this thing. Or at least warn us that there is a bear in the other room, man. We gotta look out for each other. What are you doing?
Hey, what happens between you guys and the bear is none of my business.
Wait, how is this none of your business, man? 1 in 5 people are gonna get attacked by this bear!
You're overreacting. The bear is not going to eat all of us. It'll be less than a quarter of us.
None of us should die!
And it affects us all, Jake. 1 in 5. How can you ignore something so important? How can I protect your friend? 1 in 5, 1 in 5.
The majority is fine, and I don't want to deal with this problem.
so that statistic is pretty staggering, 1 in 5. And the point of that video, obviously, is not to make light of sexual assault, but to really emphasize how prevalent it is and how often it happens. And one of our goals is the hope that through education, we can not only help reduce the amount of violence, but also empower people to come forward, to speak up for others, but also be a strong voice for themselves. So if you're watching this in a group setting, it's really important to just be respectful of those around you. Make sure that you are being careful of what you're receiving. Try to leave the story of any conversations that you may have as a group and just take with you the message and the positive points. The point is not to add trauma, but really to just provide information that's empowering. Okay, so we wanted to start out with a discussion about acts that are criminal, acts that if one performs without affirmative consent of the person that they're engaged in any type of intimate or sexual act, is criminal under the law. And first, we're going to start with a definition of sexual contact. In Minnesota, sexual contact is essentially what you'd think it would mean. Any type of contact that doesn't involve penetration, that doesn't involve the entry of an orifice from a body part. So it includes touching another person's genitals, their groin, their inner thigh, their buttocks, or their breast, regardless of whether or not there are clothes covering the body part. It's not only if it's skin on skin, it is sufficient if it's, grabbing of the butt over the jeans or grabbing of the breasts over a sweater. Any type of contact, whether clothed or unclothed, constitutes sexual contact in Minnesota. Also, touching your genitals against another person's body part doesn't have to be genital to genital, it's genital to any part of another person's body, again, whether they're clothed or not. And then touching another person with sperm or semen, and it also, I guess it would exclude any type of touching that's not sexual or done with aggressive intent. And so the reason that distinction exists is obviously, James, sorry, I'll ask for your consent. Can I touch your arm?
Sure.
This is not sexual contact because my hand is touching his arm. But of course, if other body parts were involved, that would trigger the sexual contact. So then the contrast or the other type of sexual conduct that's covered under the laws of Minnesota is sexual penetration, and that is exactly what you'd think it means, which is vaginal intercourse. It's also anal intercourse, also oral, and then really using any type of item in a sexual, just as you would any type of other sexual organ, if you insert it into a body part, either a genital opening or someone's mouth. So in order to comply with the laws of Minnesota, and these are conversations that we'd encourage you to have with yourselves, with family, with friends, in your community, and in terms of what feels right and wrong, but certainly what's right under the law is to make sure you have the person's consent. And in Minnesota, it's defined as words or overt actions indicating a freely given present agreement to perform a particular sex act with a particular person. And so we're going to really parse that out, because when you first look at it, it probably just looks like a lot of words on paper, but it's really quite clear. In Minnesota, consent is something that you have to actually get from the person. You can't assume it. It's not something that you can assume or trust exists just simply because the person is near you, with you, or goes into a bedroom with you, agrees to go on a date with you. You need to have specific consent from a person to do a certain act. And the way consent is communicated is through words or actions. So somebody's saying, yes, this is what I want to do. No, this is what I don't want to do. Or yes, this is something I'm interested in. And yes, I'd like to do that with you right now. And then also actions, things that a person does either with their, in reciprocating contact, or in other ways indicating to you clearly that they are providing a present agreement that's freely given to perform a particular sex act with you. So how is that communicated? So we just talked through words or overt actions, and here would be an opportunity for you to discuss as a group what types of words or overt actions would constitute consent, but also think about what doesn't. You know, is somebody who is simply present but not saying anything, not doing anything, is that someone who's consenting? So we're talking about what is required to prove consent, but we'd also encourage you to think about what does not amount to consent. Mere presence is not enough to communicate consent to a sexual act. So in Minnesota, the assumption is not that a person is consenting. The assumption is that they are not, unless, again, there's words or actions that indicate that interest. So how does a person convey a lack of consent? The sort of simple and obvious one that a lot of people think about is no means no. And a lot of people think that that's what's required. Well, she didn't say no, so then she said yes. Nope, it doesn't work that way. Yes, no means no, but in order to proceed, in order to conduct or continue any type of sex act, you actually have to have words or actions that communicate yes. So sort of set aside what you may have heard or what you might have heard in movies that, oh, no is no. Well, sure. But instead, we would encourage you to think about it differently and instead think about it as yes actually means yes. And anything other than yes has to mean no. So saying nothing also means no. So the absence of any words agreeing to a particular sex act means no. Other ways a person can convey a lack of consent. Does somebody have to fight back? Is it required under the law that if somebody isn't consenting or doesn't want to be doing the thing that's happening, that person either, pushes someone away or wriggles their body away from them? No. There's no requirement under the law that somebody has to communicate a lack of consent by fighting back. So just again, mere presence, the fact that the person is there does not mean that the person's consenting. A person does not have to fight back to say no, and consent does not mean that a person failed to resist a particular sexual act. Other ways, contexts to think about consent. Does a previous sexual relationship mean that there's always consent for sex? So in other words, if a boyfriend and girlfriend have had sex one time, does that mean that every single time they're together that either of them are consenting to sex? No. Under Minnesota, consent is, again, a present agreement. So it's words or overt actions indicating that at that present time, in that moment, they are saying yes. Not that they said yes a week ago, not that they said yes a month ago, not that they said yes to a friend or said that they were open to it or interested in it, last night. It's that they, at that time, in that moment, are agreeing to it and have communicated that through words and overt actions. So no, previous relationship does not mean that there's always consent. And this is a big topic that usually is quite engaging in conversation, and that's, can a person consent to some acts of not others? And we talk about this we talk about it through like scope of consent. How far wide-reaching does consent go? If you've consented to kissing, does that mean you're consenting to touching? If you've consented to touching, does that mean you've consented to penetration? And the answer is no. A person can consent to some acts and not others. Each person gets to control exactly what acts a person may do to them, and each act requires affirmative consent. So in the example I just gave, a person can withdraw consent at any time. So if a person says, yes, I'm okay with kissing, and then the person that they're with decides to start touching their body parts in a way that the individual does not like, without that consent, well, then we're starting to commit acts that violate the law. And so what's required at each and every step, at every new act, throughout the relationship or throughout the interaction, you have to get affirmative consent for each and every specific action. So again, this is perform a particular sexual act. And just to really emphasize, it's easier to think about this when you think about it in this context. It's as simple as tea. And for those of you who haven't seen this video, it will hopefully resonate with you when you finish watching it.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, "No thank you," then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please, that's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away, make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, "But you wanted tea last week," or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
All right, well, we think that video does a really great job of kind of summarizing really what the law is in Minnesota and what's right when it comes to consent to sexual acts. And Christina did a great job of explaining exactly what that law is, parsing through what acts is consent required for, and then how consent is either communicated or revoked, or the scope of that particular consent. But it's also important to know that there are certain categories of people that no matter what they say or do, no matter what the indication is, they cannot legally consent to sex. And this is important to know because in those cases, regardless of, again, what the other person says or indicates, it still would be the same type of crime as if with a person who says no. So let's look at what some of those categories are. These are kind of the legal terms for these categories of people who are unable to consent. And I'll explain what these categories are a little bit more. The first category is people who are physically helpless. And so because of their vulnerability in that condition, it's against the law to engage in sexual acts with them. So physically helpless means a person who is asleep or unconscious, or a person who's unable to communicate or withhold consent because of a physical condition. And although this isn't specifically stated in the law, what we see most often in this type of case is someone who's physically helpless as a result of intoxication. So someone who's passed out, someone who's asleep, or someone who's just so impaired or inebriated that they're not able to communicate consent or withhold consent. Another category of people who are unable to consent are those who are mentally incapacitated. This is kind of similar to physically helpless. There's been a lot of discussion about this in recent years. This portion of the law has been expanded recently to really ensure that we're protecting people who are so vulnerable because of the use of alcohol or drugs. And so mentally incapacitated has historically meant, someone who's under the influence of a substance given to them without their permission that makes them unable to give reasoned consent. So a classic example of that would be someone who is given a date rape drug and therefore becomes unable to consent. But the law has been expanded recently and now includes people who, even if they voluntarily take alcohol or drugs and become unable to give reasoned consent because of their condition, it's also a crime to engage in sexual acts with that person. The third category is people who are mentally impaired. This focuses more on a person's developmental disabilities. And so if a person has developmental disabilities to the point, or mental illness to the point that renders them unable to give reasoned consent or understand the concept of consent, it would be illegal to engage in sexual acts with that person. And then finally, and I'll expand on this category a little bit, is children. Generally in Minnesota, we think of people under the age of 18, minors as children, and a broad swath of minors or people under the age of 18 are not able to consent to sex. Again, regardless of what that person says or does or what indications they might give, whether they're potentially interested, again, they are just legally unable to give consent to sexual acts because of the vulnerability of their age. So let's break that down a little bit more. The particular laws about particular age groups get very specific, but generally, it is absolutely in all circumstances a crime to engage in sexual acts with a child under the age of 14. And the law also adds in, enhancers or makes that potentially more serious if the person is more than 3 years older than that child under the age of 14. Then if we move to children who are ages 14 to 15, we get into a realm where we're looking a little bit more closely at some of the age gaps between the two actors. So if a person is more than 2 years older than a child ages 14 to 15, or if they're more than 4 years older and in a position of authority, so someone who's a caregiver, a teacher, a coach, then it creates an increased severity. Or someone who has a significant relationship with that child, 14 to 15. So a parent, a step-parent, a guardian, a relative, other adults living in the home, it's illegal to engage in sexual acts with a child between 14 and 15. And then finally, generally sometimes you hear the phrase age of consent. In Minnesota, what we consider the age of consent to be is 16. However, there are still significant limitations. Children who are ages 16 and 17 are legally unable to give consent to sex with people that they have a significant relationship with. So again, familial relationships, other adults living in the home, cousins, that sort of thing. And then also, again, if there's an age gap of more than 4 years and a person's in a position of authority over that child, ages 16 to 17, so like a boss at work, a coach, a teacher, a pastor, something like that, that would be illegal again. So those are categories of people who are just legally unable to give consent, again, regardless of what kind of interactions or what's being said or what actions. There's also a broad swath of professionals who just are absolutely prohibited and barred from engaging in any sexual acts with the people that they serve. So some examples, members of the clergy, religious leaders who are engaged in spiritual leadership, psychotherapists and their patients, massage therapists and their clients, correctional employees and people who are housed at a correctional facility, police officers and people they have in custody, transportation drivers and the people they drive, medical providers of all kinds and the patients that they see, as well as teachers and school staff and the students that are in their schools. So again, those categories of professionals are absolutely prohibited from engaging in sexual relationships with their clients. So then, thinking about if someone engages in this behavior and violates the laws, one of the things that we like to do is just kind of give people a sense of what are the potential consequences for that. And there can be really significant, serious consequences for a person who engages in these kinds of illegal sex acts. What you see on the screen here is what we call our sentencing guidelines grid. So sentencing for sexual assault offenses vary greatly depending on the severity of the offense. And then the other factor that's considered in sentencing is what's the offender's criminal history score. So how many prior felonies do they have? And so those two axes kind of work into a grid, and then that's how we kind of figure out what is the presumptive sentence for one of these types of sex crimes. And it's kind of hard to see on our screen here. You have to kind of, zoom in pretty closely. But what you'd see is sex offenses, felony sex offenses can range from presumptively probation offenses that can carry local jail time, several years on probation, other requirements on probation, all the way up to 30 years in prison or even life in prison, depending on a person's history. So there can be really significant consequences for people who engage in sexual acts. Another thing to think about as you evaluate, you think about what kind of consequences might happen is, in our system in Minnesota, we separate offenders based on their age. So juvenile offenders, those who are under the age of 18 when they commit an offense, are treated differently than those who commit the offense when they're over the age of 18. Generally, juveniles who commit sex crimes are, presumptively looking at some kinds of treatment, sex offender treatment, to prevent the behavior from happening again. Whereas once our adult offenders come into adult court, then you're looking at more kind of punitive consequences, the kinds of probation or prison offenses. But it's also important to know that even juveniles can be certified into adult court and face adult sentences if the offense is serious enough. And I'll hand it over to Christina to talk about more consequences.
Thank you, James. So finally, when someone is convicted of a sexual offense, it isn't just, they serve their time in prison or they get off probation and then can go ahead and continue to live their lives. We require in Minnesota and throughout the country, frankly, that all convicted sex offenders register as predatory offenders. And the reason for that is there is a very strong public interest in making sure we are aware of where individuals are located and where they live, and there are rules that attach when somebody has been convicted. And so the reason we bring this up is, well, for one, you can know that you can find that information out, find out where predatory offenders live in your area, but also to know that these types of decisions that one can make can literally change lives, and you will have to carry this with you for the rest of yours. So there are criminal consequences that reach much further than time in prison or time on probation. And the predatory offender registration is one example of that. The other area we wanted to just briefly talk about is pornography. And there is an effort to sort of categorize pornography that includes images and videos of children or people under 18. And there's sort of this new trend where we're calling it CSAM, child sexual abuse material. And the reason for that, I think, is a good one. So forgive the title of this slide, but really what's important to know, it's a felony to possess any video or photograph of anyone under the age of 18 who is engaging in a sex act, masturbating, or shows bare genitals. So this is applicable if, say, you get a video on your phone, on Snapchat, or through any other types of social media that involves, say, a classmate or a neighbor or someone that you know engaged in a sex act, your receipt of that video means that you're in violation of not only state statute but also federal law. It's a crime to possess, no matter how brief, any child sexually explicit material. And so there's also a penalty for distributing it. So it's not a defense to say, oh, my buddy texted it to me, oh, my buddy sent it to me on Snapchat, and I just shared it with the rest of the football team. You're guilty of disseminating, well, you could look at charges for disseminating that type of restricted material. And consent is not a defense. It's not a defense if, say, your girlfriend sends you a video or image. It's not a defense if you possess it, not a defense if you disseminate it. You can't have consent to possess, to make, or to disseminate any type of video or photograph involving individuals under the age of 18 who are involved in a sex act, whether themselves or with somebody else. Revenge porn. You probably have heard about this in the news. You may have friends who've been victims of this, but this is very clear and unfortunately on the rise in Minnesota. But it is absolutely a crime to send a video or an image of another person engaging in a sex act or that depicts a person's bare genitals to a third party without the consent if the video or image was created at the time the person had a reasonable expectation of privacy. So this is kind of taking us outside of individuals who are under the age of 18. If this includes conduct or video or photographs of individuals under the age of 18, you're violating a couple different laws. But really when we're talking about revenge porn, it's when an individual consents or maybe creates a video or agrees to be videotaped through what was a trusted relationship, and then there's a violation of that trust and that video or image is shared with others. That's a crime. It's a crime in Minnesota, and it's one we prosecute at greater rates. So the takeaway is don't take pictures and send them to your boyfriend. Don't agree to be in videos. Don't take any type of naked photo or video. Don't send them to anyone, no matter what. I don't care if you say, oh gosh, he loves me, he'd never do anything with this video. You never know. You never know who has access to that person's phone. And what may exist in your mind and in the mind of your trusted friend today may not be the case a month from now or a year from now. And this type of situation, as our victims have shared with us, can haunt them and follow them for years to come. All right, James, resources?
All right, so we'll wrap this up quickly. These are just some of the numbers that can be helpful to people who have experienced sexual violence. And I think we're going to hear a wonderful presentation here from Cornerstone shortly about what kind of services that they can provide. But if you're in Hennepin County and you've experienced sexual violence, a number of advocacy organizations are out there. The Sexual Violence Center, Cornerstone, at the Hennepin County Government Center is the Domestic Abuse Service Center, which handles both intimate partner violence or sexual violence, and they can assist people with obtaining orders for protection. And then if someone's been a victim of sexual violence recently, within the last 7 days, and need to be seen at a hospital for a sexual assault examination, the Hennepin Assault Response Team covers, I believe, up to 11 different hospitals within the metropolitan area. And they also can see patients who've experienced intimate partner violence, those who've experienced sexual trafficking or other forms of violence as well. So these are some resources, and we'll hand things off to Cornerstone. Thank you all for being a great audience.
Hi all, my name is May. I am the Criminal Civil Justice Team Lead here at Cornerstone that partners with the City of Richfield on domestic assault and sexual assault cases. My portion of today's presentation will be pretty brief, just to give everyone some information about the services that we offer here at Cornerstone, And then my coworker Grace will be presenting more on healthy relationships, boundaries, and different types of abuse that pertain to intimate partner violence. Cornerstone was funded in 1983, and our mission statement is to help create communities where individuals and families are safe and children thrive. We advocate, educate, and lead the way to social change. Domestic violence, sexual violence, dating violence, and human trafficking are crimes and are a violation of human rights. The use of violence is a choice and can be prevented, so therefore, our philosophy here at Cornerstone is to build a society in which violence in families and relationships no longer exist. Cornerstone is a nonprofit organization located in Bloomington that serves victim survivors of domestic assault, general crime, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Cornerstone works with victims of all genders, races, ethnicities, national origin, ages, sexual orientation or identities, education, and disabilities. Our programs include our emergency services team, our community and economic empowerment program, our criminal and civil justice team, our general crime victim program that works with victims of crimes outside of domestic violence, our child, youth, and family programs, and our Day One program. Now, normally I would go through each and every program that I listed and explain a little bit more about what each program does, but due to time constraints, I won't be diving too deeply into the programs at this time. However, if you are interested in learning more about each program, there will be numbers at the end of the presentation that you can call to get more information about each program, or you can visit our website to read about them as well. Some may be familiar with our Day One crisis line. It's a 24-hour hotline for victims, survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking that may be looking for emotional support, on-the-spot safety planning, and or resources and referrals. A lot of participants use it for emergency shelter referrals, but Day One also provides referrals for other agencies as well, depending on everyone's wants and or needs. Day One provides services through calls, texts, emails, and chat, making it accessible for everyone. Day One is also a statewide program, so whether you're living in Duluth and are searching for resources there, or if you're in St. Cloud, Day One can help assist you with finding resources near you. Victim survivors will often have their first encounter with our organization through our emergency services program. Usually when officers are on scene for a domestic violence situation, they will connect victims over to our 24-hour emergency services team. The emergency services team is focused on serving victim survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and or human trafficking and their immediate safety needs. This includes addressing shelter needs for anyone who needs a safe place to stay for them and or their children to escape dangerous and unsafe situations. This isn't just limited to finding shelter or a safe place to stay, but also making sure that victim survivors are made aware of the services here at Cornerstone and can get proper referrals if needed. So say if we have a victim who is interested in petitioning for an order for protection, or perhaps working with their therapist, our emergency services team will be able to get them connected to the right program. As I mentioned earlier, I am part of the Criminal and Civil Justice Team, CCJI for short. Our team works within the criminal and civil justice court system and partners specifically with the cities of Bloomington, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Edina, the Minneapolis Airport Commission, Maple Grove, the Minneapolis Domestic Assault Unit and Sexual Violence Unit, the City of Richfield, Robbinsdale, and St. Louis Park on criminal cases. We also work with victim survivors throughout Hennepin County on civil cases. We follow criminal cases through the court system. We help file order for protections and harassment restraining orders. We help accompany petitioners to civil court for civil matters, safety plan, break leases, and provide referrals to other programs both within and outside of our agency. Advocates on our team also provide support within civil court as well. So we help write order for protections and harassment restraining orders, and we also attend civil court hearings on these matters. While we are not there to represent them, since we are not attorneys, we can help prepare them for what the hearing may look like and what they can expect from the hearing. Although we do not have attorneys here at Cornerstone, we can help provide our participants with referrals for attorneys to help represent them during their case as well. There are a couple numbers on here, so if you or someone you know is going through a domestic violence situation and you'd like to speak with someone further about it, you can call the numbers listed here on the screen. If you're not sure where to start, you can always call our main line and speak to our service navigator who can get you connected to the correct program. If you have any questions, I'll be available to answer them. Otherwise, I will let my coworker Grace take it over from here.
All right, hi everyone, my name is Grace. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here with Cornerstone, and today we're going to talk about healthy and unhealthy relationships. I'm also going to try translating as I go, but I'm not working with a transcript, so I'll do the best that I can. Pues yo soy Grace, me llamo Grace, usamos los pronombres ella, pero soy de una organización que se llama Cornerstone y hoy estamos hablando sobre relaciones saludables y no saludables. Y no estoy leyendo un transcrito, pues voy a hacer cualquier que puedo traducir como puedo. So Cornerstone is a nonprofit. May told you just a little bit ago. We provide all kinds of services to people who have experienced all kinds of violence. I am part of our school-based services team. So with the school-based services team, we go into classrooms and we talk to young people about topics we hope will stop violence from happening in the future. And we also provide one-on-one advocacy services to help support students in need. We provide services at Richfield Middle School and High School. We have an advocate at both schools here in Richfield. I am the advocate for Richfield High School. Our coworker Ruth is the advocate for Richfield Middle School. But if you are a student at one of these schools or you know a student at one of these schools that you think would benefit from support, please do not hesitate to reach out. I will have our information at the end of the presentation as well. Okay, so I want to provide a trigger and content warning here. We've kind of already talked about a lot of stuff so far with the other presentations, but now we're kind of diving more into different forms of abuse, definitions and examples. Talking a little bit more about consent, including some examples of what is not consent, like pressuring a person. And we'll talk about homophobia, transphobia, being outed, things that impact certain communities. Okay, so let's talk about relationships. Hablemos de relaciones. What are reasons to seek out relationships? When we look at reasons to seek relationships, there are healthy reasons and there are unhealthy reasons. Some of the healthy reasons that we often see include we like each other, they respect me, and I respect them. I want this partner, this specific person. We support each other. We have good conversations, we have fun together, right? Those are all great reasons to seek a relationship with somebody. And then there's also a lot of unhealthy reasons, such as everyone else is doing it. They like me, but I don't necessarily like them. They wore me down. That's not great. I'm only attracted to them physically, or I'm lonely, right? If you're seeking a relationship because you don't feel complete, that's probably not going to be a very good situation, right? So it's important that we acknowledge that there are distinctions between healthy and unhealthy reasons to get involved in relationships. So we're going to talk more about these healthy and unhealthy relationships, imagining that with all those reasons, we are now in a relationship, right? So relationships are a spectrum. It's really important to note that relationships can fall anywhere on this spectrum, ranging from healthy to unhealthy to abusive. When we look at healthy relationships, we see that they are respectful, they are accountable, people are accountable to their actions and words, and it's trusting, right? We have trust in that person. Unhealthy relationships typically are disrespectful, pushing boundaries, but not necessarily outright violating boundaries. And they're often one-sided. One person is getting more from this relationship than the other person. And abusive relationships are outright hurtful, right? Causing harm, violating boundaries, clearly going past the boundaries that have been set, and often controlling, one person being dominant over another. And that is a clear-cut sign that that is an abusive relationship. So when we're talking about healthy qualities in relationships, right, we don't want to just leave this very abstract. It's important to think, what do these qualities look like? And so we call this our wheel of healthy qualities. As you can see, we've got a lot of great things on here, like honesty, boundaries, safety, support, communication, accountability, trust, and respect. And this is not a complete list. There's more than this, right? But we like to use this image because if one of these very foundational things is missing, then this wheel is going to start falling apart, and it can quickly devolve into an unhealthy or non-functional situation, right? So it's really important that we have all of these pieces present. So I want us to focus more on boundaries, because the boundaries piece is really important, and in our work with youth, we see this come up a lot. So when we talk about healthy boundaries versus unhealthy boundaries, we want to look at what those look like, right? So some examples of healthy boundaries that we got from loveisrespect.org, great organization, highly recommend. I'm okay with regularly texting, but I probably won't respond during the school day, right? It's kind of setting a boundary based on what this person is comfortable with, right? I want to spend time with my friends and family on the weekends, right? Emphasizing space, taking time to focus on other values, right? I'm comfortable kissing and holding hands, but not in public, right? Maybe that person has a different level of comfort with public displays of affection. Maybe that's not something that's safe for them, as if this is a queer person in a queer relationship and they are not out yet. And some boundaries are non-negotiable, right? If there is a safety issue, if there is an issue with someone's comfort or trauma, that might be a non-negotiable boundary. But some boundaries might be negotiable. So for example, with that first one, right? I'm okay regularly texting, but I probably won't respond during the school day. Well, if my partner says that and I say, well, texting regularly is a pretty big part of my communication style, so if you can text back during the school day when you have a chance, like between classes, I'd appreciate that, but I won't expect you to, right? That would be a good negotiation on that boundary. So when we look at the difference between healthy and unhealthy boundaries, right? Healthy boundaries are ones that focus on your feelings, like if you are the person setting the boundaries, they focus on your feelings and your needs. They emphasize space, independence, and privacy, right? They also focus on comfort and healing, right? Unhealthy boundaries are set by like one person to control another, right? It's not about my needs or my feelings about something. It's about what I expect or want from my partner. So some unhealthy boundaries here might be, I don't want you to spend time with friends and family because I want you to spend time with my family instead on every weekend, right? That would be an example of an unhealthy boundary. Saying that I need you to text me back within 5 minutes or I'm gonna like break up with you, right? That would be an unhealthy boundary because we're telling that person what to do. Now that we've looked at some of the different ways that we can set healthy boundaries and have healthy relationships, it's important to look at different forms of abuse. And we're focusing mainly on emotional abuse. It is the most common form of abuse that occurs particularly in abusive relationships where the couple is not married. But this is the most common form of abuse across the board. So when we look at emotional abuse, there are a lot of different categories that we use. So starting off, we're going to talk about economic abuse. A lot of times when people hear economic abuse, they think of someone having control over another person's bank accounts and money. And that can absolutely be a part of it, but this also includes interfering with someone's ability to work, interfering with someone's income, interfering with their property, and denying them access to things that would help increase their wealth. Next up is digital abuse. Digital abuse, oftentimes we think of as just any abuse happening on a digital platform. Also true, but this can also include requiring your partner to give you their passwords. This can include controlling what someone can and can't post on social media, who they can and can't talk to online, requiring that they have their location on so that you can track them, basically controlling someone else's device. Right? And this is a very common form of abuse that we are seeing, especially in the past 10, 15 years among youth. And yes, adults as well, but especially among youth, right? Using isolation is another big one. It's basically just cutting off your partner from friends and family to make it harder for them to leave an abusive situation. Using intimidation, and we're kind of going to use intimidation and using threats at the same time. Using intimidation is using your body or the space around you to send a message to scare or threaten the other person or your partner. Using threats is using verbal communication to threaten your partner, and often this is in the format of an ultimatum, kind of an if-then format, right? So if you do this, or if you don't do this, then I'm going to do this, right? So using intimidation, using threats often get mixed up, but the big difference is that one is more about nonverbal threatening and the other is clear verbal threats. So double standards is another big one. Double standards basically just means different treatment for the same actions. So the one that we hear most commonly, particularly in heterosexual relationships and mostly with young people, is the boy or the male in the situation saying that his girlfriend cannot have male friends, but he is allowed to have female friends, right? That would be a double standard, different expectations for the same behavior. Deny, minimize, blame. This often can fall into mental abuse and often can include gaslighting. It's a term that's been thrown around a lot, but gaslighting is a really horrible form of abuse in which you make someone question their perception of reality and truth, right? And so a lot of ways that people do this is by denying and minimizing and blaming. So if my partner says, I didn't like the way that you treated me yesterday, that was really mean. And I say, what are you talking about? You totally made me go off. That was your fault. That's on you, right? That would be me trying to blame them for my actions and not taking accountability. And the last one is sexual abuse. This one is pretty clear cut in a lot of cases, and I know that we've already seen presentations about it more, but this can also include things like making comments about somebody's body that they don't like, controlling what someone can wear, and controlling what someone can and cannot do in a sexual setting. Those are all also parts of sexual abuse. So keeping all of that in mind, all of these different forms of abuse and healthy qualities, right, those two wheels, what are some things that would not be helpful to say to someone in an abusive relationship? Let's imagine that we have a friend or we know someone that is in an abusive relationship and they come to us for help. Why don't you just leave? This one, people ask all the time. There are millions of reasons why people don't leave abusive situations, whether it is financial dependence, because they still love them, which is totally valid, because there are kids or pets involved. And just asking this person why they aren't leaving is just going to make them feel worse. It's not going to help the situation at all. And honestly, the reason doesn't matter, right? Everyone has their reasons, and it's not our business. Denying, blaming, or minimizing, right? We don't want to kind of play into what the abuser is doing. We don't want to help the abuser with that abuse. And if we just deny what this person is telling us, or we blame them for it, or we minimize what they are describing, we're just helping that abuser with their abuse. And we don't want to do that. And escalating the situation. We've had a lot of cases where people's friends will find out that their friend's partner did something and they'll go and beat up that partner or confront that partner to talk to them. And then that abuser takes it out on their victim, right? And it leads to an escalation, and we don't want that. These are just some things that are not helpful, right? There's a lot of unhelpful things, but we'll focus more on what is helpful as well. So things that we could do or say to help someone in an abusive relationship, right? There are so many things that we can say to someone in an abusive relationship. I firmly believe the best thing we can do is say 3 simple words. I believe you. Those 3 words can have so much power and make someone feel validated, heard, and believed. And that is often the first step towards leaving an abusive relationship, right? We want to make sure that that person knows we care. We can also say, do you want me to help you talk to someone? What do you want me to do in this situation? Is there anything you need from me right now? And they might not know, but just make yourself clearly there, saying, I'm here for whatever you need, just let me know, right? Making yourself available can mean a lot to someone, especially if they have been experiencing abuse and have been isolated from people close to them. Having that person that is still there means a lot. If you are in an abusive relationship, right, if you're seeing some of this stuff, hearing some of this and saying, you know what, I feel like that's a little too familiar, talk to an advocate, a counselor, a therapist, a trusted friend, or your parents or guardians if that's a safe option for you, right? You can reach out to one of us at Cornerstone, an advocate. If you're at school, you can reach out to a school counselor. They are there and available, especially the ones at Richfield. They are wonderful. Just reach out to someone for support. And even if you aren't sure about what you want to do, just having someone to talk through options with can be really helpful. And remember that your safety is the most important thing, right? That is the priority, and not just your physical safety, but your mental, emotional, financial safety. These are all really, really important. And so we want to make sure we're prioritizing that, right? So if you're seeing this, and on the flip side, you're thinking, uh-oh, I might have done some of that. Remember that abuse is learned. It's a learned behavior, and therefore it can be unlearned. We are all capable of change. We are all capable of becoming better people, right? And you can do that with the help of a trained professional such as a therapist or a counselor, right? And it's important to remember that a lot of people who are abusers have been abused themselves, but being abused is not an excuse to abuse other people, right? There are plenty of people who are abused who do not go on to abuse other people, right? And we want to be one of those people if we have traumatic experiences in our past, right? We want to make sure that we are changing and having a good impact on the people around us. We would also encourage you to connect with us if you have a student or you are a student at a school in Richfield and you want to talk about something. Please reach out to us. You can reach out to Ruth Kendrick at our middle school. She is there on Mondays. Or you can reach out to me. I'm at Richfield High School. I am there on Wednesdays. And we are here as supportive resources. If you just want general information, you can reach out to us at our department email or just call Day One, as May said earlier, and just reach out to Cornerstone for any information whatsoever.